Dwyer, let's start by introducing you to our MedCircle members. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kyle. I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice in the greater Denver area, South Denver, actually. And I've worked throughout my career with a variety of different populations and folks. I've done school-based work, outpatient practice-based work. I've worked inpatient, and I've had my own practice for a little over the last decade. So within my practice, I work a lot with folks dealing with stress, anxiety, transitional times, and all the associated pieces that go with that. So sometimes it's sleep disturbance, sometimes it's mood disturbance, just the things that come up as we move through these transitions that a lot of them are very normal in life, but that doesn't mean they don't come without some baggage and some difficulties to wade through on the way.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I do. In the before COVID time, I was in the office. I did some telehealth. I now do 100% telehealth until we, get a little more footing under us as far as safety. I've also done a lot of assessment work in the past, usually around psychoeducational issues, learning issues, attention issues, things that tend to interfere with a student's performance in school setting.
Excellent.
So my background's both child and adult, but right now focused a little more on adult.
Well, thank you for your work in the mental health space and sharing some of your insight and education in this live class. MedCircle live classes, sessions, and any other related material are not a replacement and are not aimed to replicate treatment or therapy. MedCircle live classes and MedCircle sessions are for educational purposes only. If you have a question for Dr. Dwyer and you are watching on our MedCircle member Zoom link, you can submit that question using the Q&A box below your screen. If you're watching on YouTube, hey YouTube, why have you not subscribed to the MedCircle channel? Go ahead, we release new videos every single week. Every time you hit a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications, you are supporting us, and that helps us support the millions of people who turn to MedCircle on YouTube each month to get education. All right, Dr. Dwyer, have you been seeing a lot of COVID-related mental health issues in your private practice?
Yes, definitely. And I think it would be hard to pinpoint people that are coming to therapy only due to COVID. But what I've seen the most of is that the stress and social isolation as a result of quarantine, from COVID, changes in work, demands, both for people that are, switching to working from home and people that are working out in the public, but dealing with increased worries about safety and demands for, cleaning protocols and all those kinds of things that have to go into working, outside of the home. It's just added this whole layer for the pre-existing stress, anxiety, depression, all those things that are going on for people. So it's almost like walking through, rather than if you're dealing with a difficulty and you're kind of feeling like you have to move through water instead of air, now we're kind of moving through mud instead of water because there's just so much out there. And unfortunately, the nature of this pandemic and the need to quarantine and stay socially isolated, which, we all get for very rational reasons, makes a whole lot of sense to stop spreading a virus. But it's removed what I think is an essential layer of being human, which is connecting with other humans. And that's, built in, hardwired into our DNA as far as how we regulate our moods, our emotion, how we regulate our physiology, all of that kind of stuff has some coding into social relationships. So when we strip off a primary coping mechanism, and we put people into a high stress situation, it's a recipe for potential difficulties for a lot of people.
Certainly. I was diagnosed with depression at 9 years old, and I am always asked, and I was diagnosed with anxiety, but I'm always asked by professionals and my circle of friends and influence, well, how is your anxiety with your depression? And to be honest, I've never considered myself an anxious person or a stressed person. However, last year in 2020, goodness gracious, it was truly the first time I understood what anxiety felt like on a consistent basis, day after day. And so I can imagine not only experiencing that level of anxiety, but having a co-occurring mental health disorder. It's just that double, triple, quadruple whammy that sometimes leaves people, sitting there going, what do I do to get out of this?
Mhm.
One of the ways I've learned to get out of that is to just get educated on the signs that could indicate my COVID situation is actually really hurting my mental health or my depression or another disorder. How do you spot the signs in yourself? And also, I'd be curious to hear how you spot the signs as a professional in somebody who is not able to deal with the stressors and anxiety that come with living through this pandemic.
That's a great question. So the rule of thumb that we have, if you go through the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM that mental health folks use for diagnostic purposes, almost every, I think probably every diagnosis in there has something about these symptoms impact social, occupational, or academic functioning. So there's the presence of difficulties, whether it's anxiety or depression or distractibility, panic, whatever that issue might be. And then there's kind of like this, we kind of draw this line in the sand of, when does it become too much? And usually it's when it's impacting, how we're able to relate to others, perform our job. For kids, their job is going to school, so perform their academic or impact their academic functioning. All those kinds of things are really good indicators. But I would say, when we're in a situation where pretty much everyone is impacted in some way or another by COVID, by quarantining, by potential fear, by changes in their routines. There's some level of that stress and of that difficulty that's pretty normal, and we all kind of have to make a decision for ourselves: is when does it kind of maxed out my coping resources? When is it? When is the stress more than what I can manage by doing the things that take good care of myself? And we can talk some more about what some of those ideas might be a little later on. But when we get to that point, when it's like I said earlier, significantly impacting those jobs we have as human beings, to do our work, to be students, to show up for one another and be humans towards each other, that's an indicator that we're overburdened by it. And certainly, if anybody's ever at a point where there are ongoing periods of hopelessness or depression, or can't get out of that anxious feeling, and they're in a panicky feeling a significant amount of the time. Certainly, if people are having thoughts that they'd be better off not being around, or thinking about harming themselves, those are all times that you should not hesitate to seek some support, starting with counselor, a mental health professional if you have one, family doctor, if you need to get in quickly and find some good referrals.
hmm The power of asking somebody in need a question was really illustrated to me when I interviewed Kevin Hines, who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. He said that on his way there to jump, with the purpose to end his life, not one person asked him how he was doing, if he needed help. And he was visually struggling. And he said that if one person said, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" he would have said, "Yes, I need to go to the hospital," or "You need to call 911. I need help." And the power of just asking that question, being able to feel confident and brave and empowered enough to ask that question, for some people can be the difference of a life and death scenario. I want to go to our MedCircle member questions. If you're watching on YouTube, and oh, by the way, if you want to watch that Kevin Hines series, it is available at watch.medcircle.com. Watch.medcircle.com. Our MedCircle members watching on Zoom have submitted questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of their screen. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to conversate in the chat. I will not be taking questions from there. If you would ever like to join one of these live panels, you can do that at medcircle.com/live. This question, MedCircle member is asking, is it normal to feel exhaustion on behalf of other people, i.e. just reading about what frontline workers go through can feel distressing and upsetting?
That's an excellent observation. So part of how we regulate our own nervous system has to do with our high ability to empathize with others. And we're really, really good at it. And we have a whole, we have trauma responses, but then we have vicarious trauma responses. That term is I've mostly seen that used around frontline workers, first responder kind of folks who are exposed constantly to traumatic situations and develop a very similar experience as PTSD when the trauma didn't happen to them, but they were constantly witnessing trauma around them. And I imagine on, a different kind of level, but still a significant level, just, this constant exposure to what's going on to people around us gives us that same trauma. We're reading stories about people that were maybe younger than we are with no pre-existing conditions that got COVID and, took a turn for the worse, and the fallout, or people who've, lost multiple family members. And that's a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's horrible for the people, that are immediately impacted by it. But for people even reading about it, we feel this collective pull as people, we come into the world as babies really good at reading emotion and connecting with others around emotion, and reading about things, certainly anything where we're watching people, so they're like watching an interview with somebody talking about what their experience was. Our brain on like a pre-conscious level or outside of consciousness level is really good at reading all the subtle signs of movement around the eyes, around the mouth, reading tone of voice, reading body language, facial expression, what we do with our hands, all those kinds of things, to pick up on emotion. And then we mirror that, we feel those same feelings that allows us to connect to other people. And from like a positive standpoint, it helps us regulate our own, emotional system. If we're in a safe place, we're reading for safety from the people around us, and we can, intuit that way. Okay, I'm cool. This is a safe place. Nothing's going to harm me. My body can relax a bit. But when we're doing that with, trauma, grief, all these very understandable but very uncomfortable emotions, that revs up our nervous system, and it starts to move us into more of a fight or flight response.
Understood. I have been very wary of what type of content I allow myself to consume during the pandemic. I can't watch anything that I would be. It's why I can't watch Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. I can't do it. I'm just like, this is too upsetting for me to watch. Let's go to another question. They don't want to hear about my TV viewing. Love this question from a MedCircle member who's asking, what are the most common mental health complaints during the COVID pandemic? And has it changed from early 2020 to today, early 2021?
That's a great question too. I haven't seen, I'm sure somebody's out there doing it. I haven't seen research. I can tell you from my own experience, early pandemic, I was seeing, and I'll be transparent and share, I was experiencing just this heightened, like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Like, and our brain is really good at trying to solve problems, but we were in a situation where we didn't have all the information, right? So, what do we do? My last day working in my real office was March 12th. And I remember throwing a few things in my briefcase thinking, oh, I'll be back, couple weeks, maybe a month.
Yep.
And then we spun into like, what do we do? How do we pivot our work? How do we, for different workplaces, like how do we make this work, in a way that's safe for employees and safe for the public, and still, meets our financial needs for working. So there's a lot of like really heightened stress and immediate need and panic. And I was seeing a lot, because I work a lot with anxiety. So a lot of anxiety and people who tend towards either social anxiety or anxiety around germs and exposure, like all of that was really heightened. And part of the difficulty with that is a key component of treating anxiety is always exposure therapy. So it's getting back in those situations, because we have such a tendency to avoid what we fear. We have to retrain the brain that we can be in that situation and be safe. And we could provide a lot of support and coping strategies, but we couldn't really do exposure. How do you do exposure when you're supposed to be 6 feet away from people? You're supposed to be staying home. People are doing all these things that they're supposed to do, and it's actually feeding and reinforcing that avoidance component. So that made it challenging for people that were dealing with those types of difficulties. As time has gone on, I think I've seen a shift more from like that heightened, almost frenetic, what do I do, to like just this exhaustion. I've been doing that. My body's been at that heightened state for a chunk of time. It's continuing. We had some, in my part of the country, things didn't get back to normal, but opened up quite a bit more over the summer, and then, locked back down in the fall. And, most kids are remote schooling, starting to go back where I live. But I think the sense of I think a lot of people had a coping self-talk of like, I can get through this. I only have to do this so much longer. And, we're coming up on almost a year in a lot of places. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And I agree with you. Like, I do definitely think there's a lot more hopefulness coming in, and some sense that, we've got some steps in place to get to the end of this. But it has been a long time.
Sure. This next question is from MedCircle member. I'm going to ask it, Dr. Dwyer. Hi, Dr. Dwyer. I live in Denver and was wondering if you're taking new patients, understanding that the meetings will be telehealth appointments. I got to ask because people always want to know, are you accepting new patients?
I would certainly welcome a phone call. Right now I am full. That could change in a week or two.
Sure.
And I hear that there's a lot of need right now, and for mental health professionals. Yeah. I would welcome a phone call.
We have a great series available to MedCircle members on how to find the right provider. No question, in my opinion, that the most frustrating thing about mental health is finding a provider that works for you. Not just one that you connect with, but one that takes your insurance, is close to where you work, understands your experience, is actually trained in this modality, has actually worked in a similar demographic group, if that's possible. I mean, ideally, you would have all of these things. It's very difficult to find. We made a series that not only outlines all of the different providers you can go to. It's not just a therapist. There are lots of people you can see, but also different ways to find them. It's a great series. Again, you can go to watch.medcircle.com, or Bridget, our producer, will be probably throwing a link to that series in the live chat of this broadcast. This question is asking, hi, how do you support someone with generalized anxiety disorder coped in addition to the extra layer of anxiety due to COVID?
Yeah. So assuming like we're supporting a child or a friend or an adult partner or something like that, I really like helping people that are in those support roles to, I think of it very visually, like to rather than, a person's having anxiety and we're kind of fighting against that anxiety, which gets internalized as like we're fighting with that person, even if our intention is good. Anxious behaviors can be difficult within relationships if people are avoiding or struggling to move into what what they'd like to be doing or doing in relation to others. But really think about like, how do we then, rather than getting head to head with anxiety, how do we like come side by side with the person who's struggling, and really work to support them. So as an example, if we had somebody who was feeling a lot of anxiety about, let's say, about going out to the grocery store, being in public, potential of germs, and we're in a place where we feel it's reasonably safe to be in the grocery store with a mask on, maybe with gloves on if you need, or washing your hands, before and after, and to be in that situation for a short period of time. Like we could get confrontational and like try to, tell them why their anxiety is wrong, rationalize with their anxiety, all those kinds of things. But I love the idea of like, it's of approaching it, potentially of saying like, it sounds like anxiety is really getting in the way right now. What can I do to support you so that we can get to the grocery store? And then like, okay, now we're working together and it's you and I against anxiety as opposed to me against you, which doesn't feel good.
Yes. I love that. And throughout my interviews at MedCircle, a lot of our doctors have talked about naming that disorder, naming your anxiety or your depression. I forget which series it is, Bridget, maybe if you remember, but Dr. Judy, I think, walk me through a visual example of really taking your anxiety or depression or stress out of your brain, describing the color, the shape of it. And then part of the things you have to put it back in your brain because it's accepting that this is part of, of your experience. But a simple technique, but a powerful one nonetheless. I want to share something with you personally, but get your opinion publicly on it because I think a lot of us unfortunately are going through something similar. I received a text message last night, actually, from a friend, and I actually have it pulled up here. I won't read it out loud, but essentially it said, it was a husband and wife, and the husband's father died in a hospital last night. And of course, he wasn't able to see his father, and due to COVID restrictions, barely anybody could see him in his final moments. I think only his wife did. So I responded and said back to them, what do you need? What can I do? Do you need me to fly out there? Do you need me to fly anywhere? Do you need me to order food to your house? I can't imagine how you're feeling. I'm so sorry. What more and what else should I be doing? And is what, if anything that I did, was it out of line and not the best way to come to somebody's support after dealing with such a big event?
Yes. Well, first off, sorry, and condolences
Yeah,
for your friend. That's awful.
awful.
I don't think there's anything that you did wrong. I think we have to be there and show up, for one another in these situations. I love this, another really visual thing that I'm probably going to try to do with my hands, but the expression of support in, stress out. Have you heard that before? So if you think about the person, like in a situation of grief, the person who's grieving is the center of these concentric circles. So they're right there in the middle, and everybody who's outside of those circles should be supporting in, but they should also be venting out, and getting their own support out. So if you're like in a, as a friend, a close friend, you're in a secondary circle, to then say, if you were to, not that you would hopefully do this, but go back to your friend and say, I really want to be there for you, but it's a really inconvenient time for me. I've got a lot going on for work. Like that probably would not be super helpful. And you probably, hopefully none of us listening would do that. But talk to people who've gone through grief, and they will tell you of stories of people on the outside circles, sharing how difficult it is for them that your sibling or your parent or your child, passed away. And that's overburdening, the people that are deep in that circle that really just need the support of the people around them. So I love keeping that in mind, is what can I do to support in? And if I do have stress related to this, I need to take it out. I need to take it to my own support circle that is not related to this, this person or this situation. And I do think asking is great. What can I do to support you? I think there's something, just culturally about us as Americans, that we don't like to ask for help. A lot of people don't. Some people are good at it, but a lot of people struggle with asking for help. So another thing to do is to just think of the things that are not overstepping, but are normal kinds of ways that we show support, and help one another. And it can be a text of, hey, I'm thinking about you, had this memory and it really made me think of you. I know you're going through a hard time, but I want you to know you're on my mind. Something that doesn't require a response, but it's like, you are in my thoughts, and I'm thinking about you. It could be just, for somebody who's local to you, hey, I know you have a lot going on. I don't want to burden you. I'm dropping food off, on your front porch. I'll just text you when it's there so you can grab it. No need to even interact. If you want to talk, let me know and I'll hang out longer. Or somebody who's far away, send a gift card to, a local restaurant or something so that they can order a meal. We know that we all have to eat. So that's a real easy one to show support.
Yeah. On that same note, this MedCircle member is asking, how about caregiver guilt? I have a parent in a nursing facility. Now, this person is asking anything specific, but perhaps you can talk about what somebody does when they are carrying around that perhaps immense guilt while a family member lives somewhere else where they can't be with them.
Yeah, that's definitely really hard. And we have both, the guilt of I can't be there for you. And then, on a certain level, I think we're seeing this, here and there, on on a larger scale, we have some survivor guilt going on. We're seeing like what people are going through, and we all probably know people who are going through a whole lot, and we all probably know people, or might be people, that have been relatively unscathed. Like our life has been impacted, but we have our jobs, we haven't had major losses. So there's some of that going on as well. I think there's like some radical acceptance to do around it, that the situations that we have are the situations that we have. Nobody asked to be spared, or did something special to create a situation where where they were okay. The reality of not being able to be there for people is a very real one, and a hard one to deal with. But finding whatever opportunities that we have, that are within the constraints of what we're working with, to be there for people. And one of the things about social connection is that when we do connect with others, our body releases oxytocin, which kind of has the opposite. So cortisol is released when we're stressed, and oxytocin has the opposite impact. So it's more they talk about fight or flight with cortisol. Oxytocin's more the tend and befriend. So it supports social connection and nurturance, but it also helps our body to take care of ourselves and reverse things that happen in the aging process. Helps body repair cells, all those kinds of things. And we release oxytocin when we have those connections with others. So sometimes they call it the hug drug. So you get it with a good hug from somebody you care about, a massage. But you can also get oxytocin, this way. We can still read all those nonverbal cues and have that social and emotional connection over video. So being able to do that with a family member who's far away, get on a video call with them, and walk them through the process if it's not something they're comfortable with or familiar with. Any of those connections, writing letters, if somebody's a person in the older generation that's a letter writer, get into writing letters with them. Share a meal over Zoom. It might sound silly, but how find out when they're eating, and you be eating too. And there's definitely community and sharing food together, even if you're in different places eating different meals. Looking at family photos or pictures of people that you care about also releases oxytocin. So those are all some ways that that people can try and stay connected over that.
These video chats are no joke. They help a lot, even though this is my job and I'm working right now. I get to see Bridget, I get to see Mandy, who I'll introduce towards the end of this class very quickly. Before we jump on, I get to see you, and it's nice to see you. It's just nice to see another person to talk about something important. And I rather sit in a chair across from you, but I'll take what I can get. And I'm glad that MedCircle kind of forces me to do this all week, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing this, I don't think. And I notice the benefits of that. Before we go to our next member question, though, you just threw out radical acceptance, like, yeah, and then do radical acceptance. Like, okay,
easy,
sure.
easy
Yeah, let
peasy.
me go do that. So give me the specifics here. Pretend I don't know even what that means, let alone how to implement it, and get me to the process of radically accepting something terrible or that I hate. Let's just call it what it is.
There's $1 million question right there. So you referred earlier to thought diffusion. So thought diffusion is when we separate from thoughts, and that's name your anxiety, which I love sharing this. I worked a long time ago with a little guy who. With kids especially, I always work on like, let's give your anxiety a name, let's draw a picture of it, and then we can do whatever we want. We can tear that picture up if we need to, or we can work to combat anxiety once we have a visual of it. But on a more theoretical level, that whole process of giving your anxiety a name is thought diffusion. And thought diffusion, just like fusion is to glue to something, diffusion is to unglue from something. And we tend to get, as human beings, we get really glued into our thoughts. So if I'm having a thought of, COVID's been going on for almost a year, I am trying to be a professional and a parent and a homeschool teacher and juggle all this, and I can't see my friends, and I can't go visit my mom in another state, and all these things, and it's horrible and it's terrible. And if I'm really glued to that, like, I think about it as like a train coming into the station, and you just jump on that train and you go where that train takes you. And that train might be like going off to, out of control land and you're on it for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
That diffusion is more like, okay, I see the train's coming into the station. I'm taking a step back from, from the edge of the platform to really examine the train and make a decision about whether I want to get on that train or not. And I always have that choice. So those thoughts can be there. I don't have to get fused to them. I can notice them as the experience of my mind. I can sit on the platform and say, I can go find a bench, sit down and watch the train and say, wow, I'm having a lot of really anxious thoughts right now, or I'm having a lot of, you know, uh, life is horrible, it'll never get better kinds of thoughts right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be curious about that. Like I can wonder, what triggered those thoughts at this moment? I
Mm-hmm.
can think about if that's, is that helpful for me right now? Is that a signal um, of something I really need to be listening to? So I
Mm-hmm.
think when we have those very strong emotional reactions, it's telling us something about our value system, and usually about something that's in conflict in our value system. When we have the positive emotional reactions, it's something that lines up with our value system, but we don't spend a whole lot of time being worried about it because we're happy or we're
Yeah.
joyful or we're excited. But when it's in conflict, like the situation I just had, if part of that for me was, I'm concerned that I can't, see my family members and, this is awful and I can't stand it and it's going on too long, then the value that's coming up is something about family and connection. And there's nothing wrong with that value, normal
Mm-hmm.
human value. But if I can find a way, now that I've stepped a little bit enough away from it and recognize why that's coming up, then maybe I can align my action with that value rather than jumping on the train to crazy town. That's just going to make me upset. Maybe I'm going to pick up the phone and call my mom,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm going to write a letter, or I'm going to make plans, for a trip in the summertime and get excited about that and plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
So the back to what you originally asked about, like that radical acceptance, these things are there. Some of them I don't have any power over changing. But I can recognize them for what they are. When we distract ourselves and pretend they aren't there and avoid them, that doesn't usually help us either. I can see them for what they are, and then I can control my reaction to them. Like that's really like we have this illusion that we have control over a whole lot of things, but ultimately we can control our reactions, and
Mm-hmm.
our actions.
Yeah. If that topic resonates with you or you feel motivated to learn more about it, our series on acceptance and commitment therapy, it's where I tell most people to start at MedCircle when they join, if they're not here for a specific reason like bipolar disorder or something, because it really introduces you to your brain. For me, it was the very first time, how our thought patterns affect us, the acceptance portion of it all. It's a great series. Go to watch.medcircle.com to check that out. This is a longer question, Dr. Dwyer. Here we go. I have been diagnosed with both PTSD and depression. I am not working at this time, and the isolation and additional trauma from the deaths from COVID-19 has been exhausting to me. And as a result, I feel guilty. I have a counselor I see once a week and take online support services. In addition to this, I have nightmares and trouble sleeping. Is there any additional services to help with guilt, such as support groups? And what type of therapy helps with this? My counselor is specialized in trauma-informed care. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, it sounds like this writer has a good or a great resource already in the counselor that they're working with. So I would definitely, and hopefully this is already happening, but I definitely encourage sharing as much of that as you're comfortable sharing with your counselor, and make sure that they're clued in. And then that counselor is probably going to have a better read on what services are available in the immediate community. Guilt is an associated symptom in depression. Feelings of guilt and hopelessness, are part of that whole package of depression. So not unusual for that to be going on, and not unusual for it to be exacerbated by the things going on in the world around us. I would definitely, it does sound like this person's already seeking out some social support through groups.
Mhm.
I would, definitely encourage that, as well as looking for, maybe, and I know it's challenging with the way the world is, but looking for other support, or social connection. That's not necessarily a support group, but ways just to stay part of the community. So if there's something that you're passionate about, whether it's, through volunteer work or through charitable connection, or advocacy, getting involved in a group around that. If there's, a creative outlet, craft or a hobby or a game or a sport or, like a book club, like something like that. Just that reminder that we are part of something bigger, I think is important.
Yes. When people talk about trauma and going to therapy for it, before MedCircle, I just assumed, well, yeah, that you go to therapy and then you work on yourself and you get better. But there's lots of different modalities for trauma-informed care: CBT, trauma-informed, EMDR. I know I just listed two, but it really does go on and on. We have a lot of series on different types of trauma therapies for you to look at medcircle.com. Let's go to our next question. This person says, I already have super anxiety disorder and homeschool my grandson who does not live with me. I find that being at work part-time is actually my safe place. Is that normal?
Yes. The answer to that would be yes.
I get it. Work is my safe place. Gosh, I love being at work. Yeah.
Yes. There's probably a reason that most of us don't homeschool our kids most of the time. And it's extremely challenging. We're emotionally involved with
parents.
We're emotionally involved with our children. And we could be great at math or great at writing, and then teaching that to a person that we have like this deep emotional involvement with. It's a different kind of relationship than a teacher. And some parents or grandparents and kiddos can manage that just fine, and others, are really struggling, and lots of individual factors at work in terms of our personalities and our styles and the level of intensity and emotional regulation within the home. But I think it's 100% normal to have your workplace be your safe place and be your happy place, because we know how to do that. We have a routine. We know our job, if depending on what we're doing, like we got some training or we had some schooling or something that helps us to know how to do that. And now I have to, if we're not teachers, now I'm teaching my child. None of us were prepared for that. None of us got training in that. Layer on, for a lot of us, layer on needing to learn the technology of how to get them signed in while we're, some of us are simultaneously working from home and the internet bandwidth isn't enough. Like I've gone through it in my own house, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Oh, no question. Truly, my hats off for all the caregivers out there, parents, grandparents. If you're taking care of a kid, I don't care what the kid's calling you, good freaking job. I mean, you guys had a year and it's not over. Apart from exposure therapy, what other forms of treatments are there for anxiety disorders?
Yeah, so exposure is often kind of layered in. Some, especially for things like OCD or phobias, exposure therapy might be a larger chunk of the therapy. But cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based, or sometimes called MBCBT, mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy that you referred to earlier, ACT, are all kind of the modalities that I like to use with anxiety. So there's I usually start when I'm working with folks with anxiety with just some education about it. And anxiety is actually a very normal bodily response, but it's a body that was designed, DNA genetically wise. We were designed like 600,000 years ago for a different set of circumstances in a different environment. So it's a body that's designed to respond to life and death kinds of threats, a predator, another group of people trying to take our resources or harm us in some way. And physiologically, our body, it revs up to either, get us out of there, that's the flight part, or to stay and defend ourselves, and that's the fight part. When we have things like COVID, there's nothing to run from or fight. We can kind of run by avoiding and staying home, but there's not anything that most of us are capable of fighting, and certainly not the kind of fighting that our body is prepared for. Not the fighting that requires a supercharge of energy to our large muscle systems so that that we can duke it out against COVID. That actually might have made things easier if this was like a known thing that we could have a fist fight with. So I start with some education around that, and education around, the typical responses with anxiety, tends to be, I think, brain, body, and behavior. So 3 Bs. What's happening in the brain is we tend to keep presenting that information. Our brain's trying to solve a problem that we don't have all the pieces of information to solve. So we get into worrying and ruminating, and that can come up, especially in PTSD and in like a trauma response, that can come up through flashbacks and nightmares. Somehow that information is going to stay present because the brain is saying like, this is dangerous, figure it out and don't forget about it. um, so that's the brain. Body has that fight or flight response, which, kind of heightened over time, can just lead us into like depletion and exhaustion if we're staying in a revved up response.
Hmm.
Interferes with sleep. In a kind of a shortened and condensed response, it can be a full out panic attack where, all of those systems that are fed by the sympathetic nervous system. So, heart, our respiration, our muscle systems, everything kind of goes into, fight or flight, life or death kind of mode. And people experience that often, like feeling like they're going to die, or they're
Oh
having a
yeah.
heart attack, or show up at the emergency room not knowing what's going on, because it's extremely real. Whether it's, driven by anxiety or driven by something else, it's a very real physiological response. So that's our brain, that's our body, and then our behavior tends to be that avoidance. So it can be
Hmm.
avoidance of the situations that are going to trigger anxiety. It can be avoidance of the people or situations. It can be avoidance of the associated feelings. So some people like experience kind of an emotional numbing, because getting into those heightened states, just it feels out of control and overwhelming.
Hmm. Those are good to remember. And when you're talking about that, I remembered somatic experiencing,
Mhm.
an incredible, I call it a phenomenon. Can you speak a little bit about that?
So, somatic experiencing therapies tend to help people connect more to what's going on, in their body when things are happening. So, rather than getting disconnected, we're tuning into and connecting with.
Hmm.
So, some techniques around that therapists might use would be, kind of something you described earlier. So it's a little bit thought diffusion, it's a little bit somatic experiencing, but like, where does this anxiety hang out in my body? Like, where am I locating this feeling? If I tune my attention to it rather than avoiding it, which we often are, want to do, but if I tune towards it, where is it? Is it moving through my body? Does it stay stable? Is it like a pulsing energy or a static energy? Does it have a shape or a color or form, anything like that? So, really getting used to that. And there is an element of exposure with that too, because we're tuning towards that feeling, and getting used to it. And um, as we do that, our brain kind of learns like, okay, I can be revved up because I'm thinking about this thing that is anxiety producing, but it doesn't kill me. Like, I can handle it. And hopefully within a therapeutic environment, it's also being kept within bounds that, a client isn't feeling overloaded with it.
Well said. This MedCircle member is asking, as a grandfather observing in the background of my precious 6-year-old granddaughter, what can I look for in outward behavior of her and help her parents? I can probably see small changes, unlike the parents, that will be high taxed in normal lifestyles and maybe miss some. I think we got that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, what I always think about with kids is we're looking for change from prior functioning. So if we have a kiddo who's normally like really gregarious, telling jokes all the time, really wants to be there, be very ebullient and part of life. If they start to withdraw, like that would raise red flags for me. Kids who tend to be really social and then suddenly, have major changes in their friendships, and that one's hard right now because of COVID. I totally get that when kids aren't going to school and connecting, but another red flag for me is if kids have major changes in their friendships or withdrawal from friendships, change in academic functioning. Again, we have to take into account that kids are learning in a different way, and that's going to be also impacting their academic functioning. But a child who generally enjoys school, does reasonably well, gets their homework done without too much goading, who suddenly is really avoidant of it and not performing well. Um, just increased irritability, uh,
Mhm.
is a sign. And for kids, anxiety can often come out as irritability. So you might see a kid that seems like really irritable and angry. They're not at the root an angry kid. They're a really anxious kid, and anger. Uh,
Hmm.
Anger is an emotion that gives us a sense of control. Like now I
Mm.
can do something with it. Whereas where I'm anxious, like that just feels overwhelming and I don't know what to do with it, especially as a
Mm.
kid. So yeah, so I would look for some things like that. Just if you know somebody well and you see significant change, if it's enough to like raise your eyebrows, then there's, I would tune into it and just ask. Like, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong necessarily, but it's like a good opportunity to ask questions, or even just to go into like this observing mode. Like, I've noticed you don't seem real excited about school anymore. Is that something
Hmm.
that, that we want to talk about?
Hmm. Excellent. You use the word ebullient.
Yes.
What? How do you?
Uh, gregarious, full of
Yeah. No,
life. Yeah.
I love the word ebullient. I need to use that ebullient. My word of the day there. If you are watching this and have never heard of MedCircle, MedCircle is more than just a YouTube channel on the internet. MedCircle is a membership service where you can choose between annual or monthly memberships to access trusted and credentialed mental health information. Our award winning video library and video streaming service gives you access to lots of titles across many mental health topics and treatments. We also host multiple live classes throughout the week, like the one you're watching or listening to right now. And of course, you can access all of our content through the MedCircle app. You can download it for free in the App Store on all devices. You can also go to medcircle.com to get started. If you're a healthcare worker, member of the military, teacher, student, professional, we have discounts for you. Please email Mandy, support@medcircle.com. Her email address is support@medcircle.com, and she'll get you hooked up with the best deal for you. Thanks for trying us out. Dr. Dwyer, let's go to our next MedCircle member question. This person says, curious of your thoughts on ways the clinical community can engage in self-care without losing momentum. Those of us in social services have not had a break. I hear you. Many are depending on us to be there for them whenever needed. My colleagues and I are almost afraid to take a little time off for fear of shutting down the exhaustion, for fear of shutting down from exhaustion and or coming back to even worse scenarios. Clients need to know that we have limits and we are experiencing some of the same feelings as they are.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a dilemma. I do think for providers, to be able to handle the level of difficulties that people are having, while also, we're all going through somewhat parallel situations, with dealing with the impact of COVID on our own businesses and lives and children and all that kind of that stuff. Um, Really working towards balance as much as possible. And it might sound kind of cliched for mental health providers to hear that, but I do really believe that that's the heart and soul of it, is having that balance. So recognizing when you're no longer effective or moving towards not being effective because you're overburdened yourself, and finding, whether it's a peer consultation group to work with, or supervision, or your own therapist, or some of those other things I talked about earlier, like finding those other outlets in life that fill you back up. That maybe, we all tend to not spend as much time doing the things that fill us back up when we're feeling depleted and exhausted. But often that's where we need the time. So like if you're an exercise person, getting exercise. If you're a creative person, like pulling out your paintbrush and your paints and spending some time doing that. Spending some time caring for others outside of your work can, fills people up, if that's their thing. So it's definitely very real. And it's problematic. I think on more of like a agency level, for people that aren't in private practice, that are working in agencies, like, working with the administration to figure out what kind of coverage is in place so they can take time off, so that they're not coming back to, 20 fires to put out after they've had a few days out of the office, is important as well.
Yes, absolutely. As a reminder, MedCircle is not a treatment or therapy service. We do not provide, recommend, or refer treatment in any way. MedCircle original series and live classes are for educational purposes only. That being said, MedCircle members asking, what would your advice be for adults struggling with their currently untreated ADHD in this situation of an ongoing lockdown?
Mhm.
Are there any exercises that may provide some relief, for example, or anything that can help regain focus on work or in moments in which impulsivity, anger, etc., may take over? Thank you very much in advance, Dr. Dwyer.
Sure. Yeah. So for untreated ADHD, um, my first recommendation would be if you know that that's what's going on, and you're open to treatment, certainly seek that out in your community. Um, from a behavioral standpoint, the things that we have in our arsenal to help with attention and decrease distractibility, we know that sleep, diet, and exercise. Like I always think, like first you got to take care of the body. So we have our best attention when we've had a good night's sleep, and that's challenging when you're stressed. So I think about like that hour before going to bed is really key for having routines, to get ready for bed, for reducing overstimulation from electronics, not just the light, but also the content that we're consuming before we go to bed, for having as calm of an atmosphere as possible. And we could talk for a while about sleep hygiene, but basically if you look up sleep hygiene strategies, you'll find lots of information about things that optimize your environment for getting a good night's sleep. So that's sleep. Diet, there's some research that shows that high protein early in the day is really important for attention. So protein at breakfast, protein at lunch gives the building blocks for dopamine, which helps to engage the frontal lobes of the brain. That's kind of where we think executive function skills, excuse me, hang out, which help us to direct and refocus our attention. And ADHD isn't necessarily a situation where there's an inability to pay attention. It's more about directing and shifting attention. So we want to have, those skills, fully online so that we can shift our attention and manage our attention the way that we want to. So that's sleep, diet, exercise. This is the third one. So there's research that suggests that high intensity exercise, especially early in the day, is really important for managing ADHD. And I know that can be hard for people to get that early in the day, especially if they're not morning people, but if possible, and the exercise piece is also going to help with sleep. So if possible, getting outdoors, if it's, warm enough weather where you are, and getting exercise before you start your workday is wonderful. If not, trying to work that into your routine.
Mm-hmm.
Getting exercise. So that's from the body standpoint. So caring for the body is number one. And the next thing is really controlling the environment as much as possible. Really helps with ADHD. So if you're working from home, having a dedicated, and this can help for people without ADHD, but we all get distracted when we're working from home sometimes. So having a dedicated workspace, preferably, if your house or apartment allows it, in a room where you can close the door and leave at the end of the workday, is great. So you're setting up all the environmental cues of this is where I pay attention and do my work. Again, for those people who are working at home, using timers. So sometimes that's called the Pomodoro method.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
setting, yeah, you've heard of that. So
We have a whole series on
you do?
Pomodoro.
Okay, so it's from the
Awesome.
little tomato. So Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. So the little kitchen timer that looks like a tomato, but you can find one online. I think it's called tomatotimer.com. It's an online version of that. It's just a super simple timer. So you decide, what your kind of what your baseline attention span is. If it's 30 minutes, great. Set a timer for 30 minutes. Hyper focus on what you need to do, and then build in a 5 to 10 minute break. But you got to set some real strong rules for that. Like during that 30 minutes, I'm not checking email. I'm not, the phone's going to go
Mhm.
have a little vacation in the other room. And I'm really going to stay focused on what I'm doing. And also setting the parameters, like if you're, again, if you're working from home and there's other people at home, setting some parameters about when you're available for interruption, when you're not available for interruption. And some people don't have that luxury if they're, if they're the single adult at home, managing kids who are schooling, that's definitely challenging. So maybe it's, trying to work schedules around each other so that you can get your best focus.
Excellent. I want to see, we only have a few minutes here, and then we're going to bring in Mandy, our newest MedCircle team member, who's also going to share a little bit about her lived experiences and her role with MedCircle. But hopefully very quickly, Dr. Dwyer, we can get 2 more questions answered by you. This MedCircle member says, hey, attending from Africa, my question, what anxiety coping strategies can you recommend for youth during this COVID-19 season?
Mm-hmm. So there are probably a lot of different strategies that we could share. Some important ones are some of the things I just referred to. So making sure that you're taking really good care of your body through sleep, through diet, through exercise, through social connections with others. Those are, I kind of think about that. That's like the care and feeding of the human being manual that we should have all gotten at birth, but we didn't. So do those things that you need to do to take care of yourself. And then some strategies that can be helpful for kind of that acute in the moment anxiety are things that are going to help to reset the nervous system. And when we get into a fight or flight response, it's our sympathetic nervous system that flares up. So all of our energy diverts to keeping us safe. Our heart beats faster, our blood pressure increases, our breathing rate increases. We divert blood flow to our large muscle groups to give energy so that we can fight or run. We actually divert blood away from the brain, which isn't so great if you're trying to problem solve a situation and you're not getting enough blood to the brain, but that's why we can feel dizzy. We're diverting blood away from the digestive system so we can feel nauseous or have other GI kinds of stuff going on when we're anxious. So when we think about all those things, if I said, okay, I want you to make your heartbeat slow down, most of us would be really bad at that unless we're like really trained yogis or had some other practice that really trained us to do that. But most of us are really good at slowing down our breathing. So that's like because we have both voluntary and automatic control over our breathing rate, we can voluntarily work to slow down our breathing.
Excellent.
So that can definitely be a starting point. And there's a strategy that I really like is called the relaxation response. It combines 4 slow, deep breaths with closing our eyes, which helps to kind of reset the brain and gets our brain into a more relaxed state. Putting a gentle smile on our face, not like a crazy clown smile, but like just a gentle smile, which sends a signal back up to the brain, like she's smiling right now, she's okay. And then repeating something soothing. It could be just a mantra, it could be, I've got this, I'm gonna be okay, I'll just breathe through it. Could be a line from a song or anything.
For me,
Really.
it's a Britney Spears lyric, so I fully understand.
Are you going to share it with us now?
Oh, I mean, I'm stronger than yesterday. I mean, there's so many. We'll be here all day. As we come to the end of our time, Dr. Dwyer, where can people learn more about you, find you, connect, and interact?
Absolutely. So my website is drkimdwyer.com. And I've got, some general information about my work and some blogs that cover different topics on there. That's really the best way to find me online. I think I have a contact form on there for folks who are looking for, potentially for therapy that want to reach out that way. Or, phone calls always welcome for folks that are looking for that. But usually in terms of people that are looking for general information, my website or my blog is probably the best place.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot more to come with Dr. Dwyer here on MedCircle as well. We look forward to having you back, Dr. Dwyer, and thank you for sharing part of your brain with us today as we learn more about mental health during this incredible time. I hate even saying that because everyone says unprecedented, incredible, but it really is. That's why we keep using those words. Thank you for being here as a MedCircle member. Don't go away just yet because I'd like to introduce Mandy to you, who's our new member advocate. But Dr. Dwyer, I know your time is precious, and thank you for giving us a full hour of it. We'll see you on the next one.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you guys for all attending. So for the last about 1.5 or 2 years, I was the host at MedCircle, and I wore a lot of hats. One of them being I did all of the customer member support. I actually loved doing it. It really connected me with the members, with you. I got to hear all of your questions, your comments, your suggestions, and it's great. But we're growing and we're growing fast, and we are fortunate enough to now have Mandy on board. And Mandy, if you'd like to join us, feel free to join us. There she is. Wow, in a dark cave out of Chicago, Mandy.
We're about to have a snowstorm, so.
Oh, got it. Well, Mandy, I know that you and I have known each other for a while, and you have done lots of stuff with MedCircle in the past, and we're happy to have you in this role, not only because you and I are both such a stickler for customer service. I never want anybody to have a bad customer service experience at MedCircle, because it's my least favorite thing to work with a company and then they like don't care. I go, what are you talking about? You don't care. Like, this is why you open. Anyway, Mandy and I are on the same page about that. But perhaps even more importantly, Mandy has a lived experience. She is a mother. She is a mental health advocate. This is not a space that she is new to. And so we're happy to have her. Mandy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Kyle, for the introduction. Yeah, I am a mom of three. I've had a lot of lived experience. I have some childhood trauma that kind of spread into a whole vast array of experiences throughout my life. I used to be a high school teacher, kind of went through the education piece of that, which was very helpful for any field, but especially in helping people. And even just being a mom and trying to navigate e-learning. So
Mm.
that's been helpful. Then I got into a couple of nonprofits that were mental health focused and was graced to be joined with MedCircle a couple of years ago.
Yes.
But it
And as somebody with that lived experience, I'm always curious to see how your life changed once you added MedCircle into your health routine. And if I can just expand on that just a little bit, and myself included, until I joined MedCircle, you just don't know what you don't know. But we tend to treat the symptoms of our mental health with therapy and medication in some circumstances. And those are incredibly valuable and wonderful things to have, but I didn't understand the necessity of the third component to caring for yourself, which is the educational component. And unfortunately, it's a very hard component to get because of the internet. There are things everywhere saying one thing over here, another thing over here. I mean, anybody with an internet connection can post whatever they want. And so when MedCircle provided this credentialed education for me, I know my life changed. I'm wondering how this education that MedCircle provides changed your life or your family's life. And by the way, I didn't tell her I was going to ask her this.
did not.
She's right here, so I'm asking her.
I am kind of biased to education, hence my background, but it is, you can never, you're always learning till the day we pass, or there's always
Mhm.
something to learn. And it really, that phrase, knowledge is power, is really, it's really accurate. And even from a mom standpoint, a lived experience, an educator, I've had issues with each one of my children and even myself as I've gone through life that are
Wait, so
different.
your children are not perfect?
No, no way. Not at all. They each have their own challenges. And even if they have the same challenge, like if they're all dealing with anxiety, they're going to deal with it differently. They're going to need
Mhm.
different things. And if we didn't have sound education and resources and outlets and professionals, we'd kind of run out of options. And this is really kind of a limitless opportunity for everybody to be able to find something that works for them.
Yes. Now, to talk about work for a little bit, Mandy is our member advocate, meaning she oversees any questions, comments, or concerns that anything from I need to reset my password to how do I gift this membership to my whole family. Mandy will help you with that. Again, our whole core belief when it comes to customer service is to do the right thing. That is what we repeat to ourselves. Just do the right thing. And I want every part of your MedCircle membership experience to be a valuable one. And that includes your experience working with support. I want it to be quick, fast, and resolved as timely as possible. If we screwed up, let's make it right, because nobody is perfect, but we certainly can do the right thing after a screw up. And so Mandy and I and the rest of the MedCircle team are very committed to that for you. If you would like to start a trial with MedCircle, you can just go to watch.medcircle.com and start a trial. You get 7 days to try it all out for free. If you don't like it, cancel it. You won't get charged. If you love it, great. Glad you found it. It's a really wonderful resource, and I can't wait to hear about your first big epiphany, takeaway, or aha moment that comes with this type of education. Mandy, is there anything else that you want to add or say to our members?
I'm glad you're all here, and look forward to Friday and the next session, and just continue learning.
Wait, so what's Friday?
Friday,
The next class?
the next live class.
Okay, well, that made it sound like it's Monday and you can't wait for work to be done on Friday. And everyone's going to go, gosh, it must suck to work at MedCircle.
No, I love working at MedCircle.
Okay, good. Yeah, we all work really hard, but I think we have fun. At least I do. If you work at MedCircle and you're not having fun, will you please email me so we can fix that? Doesn't mean you're going to work less. Just means we'll figure out a way to work better or different, because this should be fun. Thank you, Dr. Dwyer, again for being here today. Mandy, welcome to MedCircle. Of course, Bridget, who is the producer behind the camera, thank you for all your hard work. I'm Kyle Kittleson. Remember, whatever you're going through, you got this. Done. All right. If you guys need anything, email Mandy. support@medcircle.com. Dr. Dwyer, thanks for sticking around. It was lovely to see you. I didn't know we were going to have you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad. It was a long time collaborating to get to this point.
I know.
Unfortunately, COVID threw such a monkey wrench into it, but I'm glad that we got here.
I know. Yes, I get it. A copy of this broadcast will be edited and uploaded within 3 to 5 days to the video library at watch.medcircle.com. If you're a member, you can access all past classes there as well. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. It's hot in here, so I'm going to go get out of these hot clothes. It's raining where I am. I'm going to go enjoy the rain. You guys have a great day, and we'll